this is your host. So yesterday, while I was driving home from the store, I saw a mannequin in the parking lot of a clothing store that got me thinking about something that happened to me when I was a child. And I've never been able to forget it. So here goes. It was one Saturday morning like any other. My mom let me choose what we were going to have for dinner that night. She called it family choice night. I think she did it every Saturday. I can't remember. But we had the choice of pizza or spaghetti with meat sauce. I chose spaghetti. So that's what we had. Afterward, my dad decided he wanted some fresh bread. So he took us down to the local Italian bakery, which was also the closest thing we had to an actual Italian restaurant. So there we were at the bakery. They had all these Italian pastries sitting in their glass case. And you know how those things are, right? The lights shining on them makes them look delicious. Makes you want to eat them. My dad went up to the counter to get some bread. My mom sat with me in a chair while we waited. I was 5 years old, and the only thing I remember thinking in my head was, I wish we had some ice cream instead of this bread. Well, my mom must have read my mind because she said, how about if I take you to Ben & Jerry's for ice cream after the bakery? And I said, yeah. And then she went back to talking to my dad. So I looked around the bakery, and there was this huge ceramic jar full of candy. It had all these brightly colored candies inside of it. And I don't really remember what they looked like now, but I remember thinking how cool that would be, just to have that giant jar of candy. And then I started thinking, well, why not ask for some? What do I have to lose? So I stood up in my little high chair, and I yelled as loud as I could, can I please have that giant jar of candy? And everybody in the bakery stopped and stared at me. And I kept yelling until my mom finally came over to me. She picked me up and she said, honey, that's not very nice to ask for. And you can't just yell like that. Then she put me back down in the chair. I was getting kind of embarrassed, so I sat down and crossed my arms. Then my dad came over with our bread and he said, all right, who wants to go get some ice cream now? And I said, I do. So we left the bakery and we walked toward Ben & Jerry's. Well, we weren't quite there yet, but suddenly I felt this overwhelming urge to get that jar of candy. I don't know why, but I told my dad. I changed my mind. I want that jar of candy, he said. We already left. We're not going back. And I started to cry. So he relented, and we went back into the bakery. Well, by now, there was a line of customers waiting to be helped, and I was still crying. So my mom went up to the counter to get the jar of candy. As she reached for it, she turned to me and she said, there you go. Here's your stupid jar of candy. She handed it to me, and the next thing I remember is staring at the jar, just staring at it. And I started to feel weird. And then I started to get scared, and I tried to hand the jar back to my mom. But before I could, she said, no, you asked for it. Now you take care of it. And then she walked away. So I don't know what came over me, but I grabbed the jar and I ran out of the store. I didn't stop running until I was across the street in front of the Ben & Jerry's. By now, I was out of breath, and I don't know what I expected was going to happen. But I just kept holding the jar as I walked up to the counter. And I remember saying to the person, do you want this jar of candy? And they said, what? And I said, this jar of candy, do you want it? And they said, no. So I said, okay. And I turned to leave. That's when I saw the girl. She was standing behind the guy in line in front of me, and I noticed her eye. It was like this creepy, dead-fished stare. But then I blinked. And as I blinked, her eyes moved. They followed my eyelids. And I know this sounds crazy, but I swear they were real eyes underneath the paint. They were following my eyelids as if she were watching me. Of course, I freaked out. I dropped the jar and I started screaming at the top of my lungs. And the next thing I knew, my mom was there holding me, and I was trying to tell her what I just saw, but I couldn't get the words out. I don't know if it was shock or what. But all I remember is feeling terrified. Well, my mom must have known what happened. She scooped me up and she ran out of the store without even saying a word to anybody. That was strange. And ever since then, whenever I see a mannequin or a doll or anything like that, and I blink, I think its eyes are following mine. And it doesn't help that sometimes it seems like they're staring at you, especially when they're in the corner of your eye, right? You just think, oh, geez, are they following me? Are they watching me? But anyway, that's my story. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Did the eyes move or not? Let me know, and be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. And here's another story that I think you'll enjoy. About a year ago, I was home alone and I heard footsteps in my app. I'm telling you, you won't believe this one. Click here to listen. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.